I used to think trust was something you either had or didn't, like a switch, on or off. I didn't realize it could be slowly drained out of you without you noticing. My wife and I had been together for 13 years, married for 9. We weren't dramatic. No constant fighting, no breakups, no cheating rumors. People called us boring in a good way. I took that as a compliment. Stability mattered to me. The first thing that changed was her attention. Not in an obvious way. She still listened when I talked, but her eyes weren't really there. She'd nod, give the right responses, but it felt like she was multitasking emotionally, like part of her was somewhere else. When I asked if everything was okay, she smiled and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" The question felt rehearsed. She started spending more time with her co-workers after hours, team dinners, drinks, networking. I didn't mind at first. I trusted her. I trusted us. But she stopped inviting me, stopped mentioning names, stopped sharing stories. If I asked follow-up questions, she'd say, "It's boring work stuff." If I asked again later, she'd say, "Why are you so fixated on this?" That word, fixated, made me pause. Around the same time, she became strangely generous with compliments. Told me I was a good husband, that I was safe, that she appreciated how understanding I was. It felt nice, but also misplaced, like praise given in advance. One night, I came home earlier than usual. She didn't hear me at first. I stood in the hallway and heard her laughing softly on the phone. Not a loud laugh, intimate, the kind she used to save for me. When she noticed me, she jumped slightly and ended the call immediately. "Who was that?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Just a coworker." Something in her tone shut the conversation down before it could start. That night, lying in bed next to her, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't worried about what she was doing. I was worried about how easily she'd learned to keep me from asking. And once that thought settled in, it didn't leave. After that night, I started noticing how carefully she chose her words. Not lying outright, just redirecting. If I asked about her day, she'd give me the highlight reel. Nothing I could question. Nothing I could hold on to. She began guarding her phone more deliberately. Not panicked, not sloppy. Just intentional. Always face down. Always within reach. Notifications off. If I joked about it, she smiled and said, "You're really observant lately," like that was something I should be embarrassed about. One weekend, she said she had to attend a last-minute work retreat. Overnight. I didn't argue. I told her to have fun, to relax. She hugged me longer than usual before leaving, like she was bracing herself for something. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I thought she was cheating. At least not yet. It was a silence. The way she hadn't asked how I was doing. The way it felt like she'd already stepped into a life that didn't require my presence. The next morning, I got a text from her, heading into meetings. No signal here. An hour later, a mutual friend messaged me. "Hey, random question. Is your wife in the city this weekend?" I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I replied, "No, she's out of town for work." There was a pause. Then, "Oh, weird. I thought I saw her last night." My chest tightened, not with certainty, with possibility. When she came home the next day, she seemed lighter, relaxed, like someone who'd had a good weekend. She talked about team-building exercises, long discussions, inside jokes I couldn't verify. I nodded, listened, didn't accuse. Later that night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. One message, no name I recognized. "Already miss you." I didn't touch the phone. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I sat there, feeling the last piece fall into place. Because in that moment, I understood something that made everything else suddenly make sense. She hadn't been hiding a secret from me. She'd been slowly moving me out of the picture. After that message, something in me went quiet, not numb, focused. I stopped looking for reassurance, stopped hoping for an explanation that would make everything feel normal again. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask about the message. I wanted to see how far this version of her life went, and how easily she could switch between worlds. She started watching me instead. Are you okay? You've been quiet lately. Did something happen at work? I answered the same way she always had. Calm, vague, just tired. It clearly bothered her. She tried to pull me back into the old rhythm. Small arguments, playful jabs, reminders of how close we used to be. I didn't bite. A few days later, I checked something I hadn't thought to check before. Our shared calendar. It used to be full. Dinners, birthdays, plans. Now it was empty, almost aggressively so. I realized she'd been keeping her real schedule somewhere else. That night, I asked a simple question. Who is he? She didn't pretend not to understand. She laughed softly and said, You're jumping to conclusions again. I told her about the message. Just that one line. Already miss you. Her face changed, not to guilt, but to irritation. You invaded my privacy, she snapped. I nodded. So that's a yes. That's when the conversation shifted. Fast. She told me she'd been lonely, that I'd been emotionally unavailable, that she hadn't planned for this to happen, but it did. She spoke like she'd practiced this version of events long before I ever asked the question. I listened, didn't interrupt, and while she talked, I realized something that hurt more than the affair itself. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control of the story. Because even now, even caught, she wasn't asking how I felt. She was explaining why she was right. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't going to end with honesty. It was going to end with a decision. After that conversation, she acted like everything was temporarily complicated but fixable. Like we just hit a rough patch that needed patience and understanding, mostly from me. She asked for space, but only on her terms. She wanted time to figure things out, while still expecting me to be emotionally available whenever she needed reassurance. If I pulled back even slightly, she'd accuse me of being cold. If I stayed calm, she'd say I didn't care enough. It was exhausting. I started noticing how often she reframed things. If I brought up the affair, she'd shift the focus to my reaction. If I mentioned trust, she'd talk about how controlling I sounded. At one point, she said, "This is exactly why I didn't feel safe being honest with you." That sentence stayed with me, because it turned her betrayal into my flaw. And suddenly, I wasn't the one who'd been lied to. I was the one who needed a change. That's when I stopped engaging emotionally. I answered politely, briefly. I stopped trying to be understood. And that, more than anger, unsettled her. She began looping other people into it. Friends checking in on me. Her sister asking if I was okay. Subtle concern wrapped in politeness. I could hear the narrative forming, without ever being said out loud. I realized the affair was only one layer. The deeper issue was that she was preparing a version of events where she was justified, and I was unstable. So I did something I'd been avoiding. I spoke to a lawyer, not to file anything, just to understand my position. What mattered, what didn't, how silence could be misinterpreted, how documentation could protect me. For the first time in months, I felt grounded. That night, she asked me, "Do you even want to fight for this?" I looked at her and said, "I don't want to fight for something that only works when I doubt myself." She went quiet, and in that silence, I knew the marriage wasn't ending because of the affair. It was ending because I'd stopped letting her decide who I was. After that, things didn't explode. They faded. She tried a softer approach, suggested counseling, talked about resetting and learning from this. She even apologized, not for lying, but for how everything had come out, for the timing, for how hard it must have been for me. It sounded reasonable, almost convincing, but I noticed what was missing. She never asked how it felt to discover the truth, never asked what I needed, never asked if I trusted her anymore. Every conversation still revolved around managing the outcome, not facing what had happened. I stopped correcting her version of events. I stopped defending myself to people who'd already heard her side. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other and making decisions quietly. When I finally told her I was leaving, there was no dramatic speech. I said, "I don't know who I am in this relationship anymore, and I don't want to find out by staying. She looked stunned, not heartbroken, just surprised, like she'd assumed there would always be more time to steer things back under control. The weeks after were strange, quiet, painful in small, unexpected ways. But underneath all of it was something steady, clarity. I realized trust doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes when you're asked, over and over, to ignore what you see and feel. And love doesn't survive when one person gets to define reality for both. Walking away didn't feel like winning. It felt like finally stopping the loss. If there's anything I learned, it's this. When someone is more invested in controlling the story than telling the truth, no amount of patience will fix it. At some point, the only honest move left is to choose yourself. And that choice, as painful as it is, can be the beginning of everything getting quieter. And finally, real again,